is John Colo with OKRod.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you, coming at you from my beautiful backyard garden here in the springtime. And this is a very important episode I want to share with you guys today. I'll give you guys a presentation, just running through some slides on my laptop here for you guys. And this presentation is literally titled Finding the Sweet Spot for Health. This is based on my personal research, my personal experience, also evidence-based science, right? Of course, I have my own kind of spin on it as well, but a lot of this is actually science-backed, so you should be confident in this presentation. You know, my views over the many years I've been living on a raw vegan diet now, I started in 1995, so this is my 30th year, have changed a bit, especially more in the recent years. You know, maybe when I was a lot younger, I was a lot more kind of like crazy and just like willing to try and experiment with more different things that were more fringe and not fully accepted by science. And of course, when I started, you know, science was not as easily accessible at our fingertips as it is today. So I've researched a lot more since then. And also too, you know, these days in terms of diet, right, I'm not that radical anymore. You know, like all fruit diets are the healthiest. I don't know if I've never even agreed with that, but my idea of how much fruit and other foods we should eat have changed a lot, because before I was like, you could just eat fruits and vegetables, you're gonna be fine, and maybe some nuts and seeds, you know. And nowadays I have a whole different, you know, thought process based on my experience, and also looking at the science, and also looking at especially longevity, you know. Another thing I'll say is that this information is nuanced. What I'm sharing with you guys today is how I live my life. I'm not going to share with you guys how you guys should live your life, you know, but you may want to take how I live my life into consideration, so that you can live your life, you know, in a similar or maybe even different way, okay? So when it comes to nutrition, extremes often grab the headlines. Like, I've lived 30 years on an all-fruit diet, right? I mean, that grabs headlines, right? I lived 100 days on juice only and lost 500 pounds. I don't know, is that even possible? But nonetheless, that's where we're at today, unfortunately, with social media. Extreme often grab headlines, but long-term health is rarely found in rigid rules or one-size-fits-all diets. This is one of my key messages, you know. Any specific diet model is not going to work for every single person. We all have uniqueness about us, our unique microbiomes, our unique genetics, all these other things. And so this presentation introduces a nuanced, evidence-informed framework built around one key idea. And my key idea is simply this: there's a sweet spot, doesn't mean you need to eat sugar, for every food group and nutrient, right, where performance, vitality, and longevity are maximized, right? And if you eat outside the sweet spot, you're gonna have more issues, in my opinion, right? And we'll talk about why I'm talking about sweet spot in a minute. It's actually because of my nephew. Anyways, rather than fear carbs, fats, or raw foods, or anything, or chase macros in isolation, my approach emphasizes balance over restriction. Very important. Even many raw food diets restrict things such as heat processed foods. Quality over quantity. Very important. Don't just pound in more sugar because you need more carbs, because carbs are the answer. That's not true based on the science. Nonetheless, I really want you guys to focus on quality. That's why I'm actually coming at you from my garden here in the springtime. You know, I want you guys to always source the highest quality food you guys can, including growing it yourself. This is something that not a lot of other raw vegans talk about, and not that many other raw vegans even grow their own food or know what it takes to grow their own food. And of course, another very essential component of my diet and lifestyle that I've been preaching for many years now is diversity over dogma. Dietary diversity is so huge. And, you know, so many people put themselves in a box by labels. And, you know, I'm not a big fan of labels. I've never necessarily been a big fan of labels. Links down below if I remember to my videos where I discuss the raw food label. Nonetheless, in this presentation, we're going to go over a bunch of slides, and each slide explores the optimal intake range for core food and nutrient categories based on what best supports health span, gut health, performance, and long-term sustainability. Of course, these are my views, which is what I like to say is evidence informed, right? I basically take the evidence, also take what I believe, and kind of come up with my own framework. So with that, let's get into it. All right, so here is the first slide, and this presentation is all about hitting the sweet spot, right? My nephew Nico, he's a big baseball player, right? He goes up to bat, and he's a really good player, actually. And he knows that if he hits the ball right at the right point on the bat, right, then he could hit it like really far and hit a home run and whatnot. And if you hit it off to the side or too close to the handle, then it's going to foul out. It's not going to go far, and then, you know, you're going to get thrown out, right? And so there's many things in life that are like this, is that we want to kind of have the ideal spot. But, you know, every time Nico goes to bat, I wish he would have hit in a sweet spot. It depends on, you know, how the pitcher's pitching and all these things. But in many cases, you know, you try to do your best to get it right in that sweet spot, but sometimes you get really close. And hey, sometimes getting close is good enough, because you can get to first base, second base, or even third base. You just ain't going to hit that home run every single time, and that's all right, as long as you're not striking out or you know, fouling out or whatever every single time. You're good, and you're going to be a great baseball player, matter of fact. And that's what I want to discuss in this episode. I want you guys to strive in your diets to hit that sweet spot every single time, right? Instead of specific rigid amounts, right? You need to eat an all-fruit diet, right? Without leaving much room for anything else, right? I'm going to always give you guys a range, a thing that you should shoot for, you know, maybe ideal for me anyways, and then the range of what you should do. So this first slide is basically a graph of basically your calorie intake. So this is for a normal standard male, where, you know, males are supposed to eat about 2,000 calories a day. And of course, there have been plenty raw vegans that undereat, and they undereat too much. And if you don't eat enough food, then you're going to wither away. You're not going to get the nutrients you need. You're not going to get the different amounts of fats and proteins and carbohydrates you need. Your body is not going to get all the different phytonutrients, vitamins, and minerals it needs to survive. And you're going to get too skinny, muscle loss, and all these other crazy things could happen, right? And so that's why you don't want to get too low of calories, right? Likewise, you don't want to be too high of calories. If you eat too many calories, and if we look around at most Americans, in my opinion, most Americans are eating too many calories, and also, of course, the wrong kind of calories, because they're highly processed food calories with very low nutrition. And if you eat too many calories, then you're going to have problems with potentially metabolic damage, being overweight, having too much fat on you, and not being healthy either, right? So we want to hit the sweet spot for our calorie intake. Once again, so you could see, right, the peak of the graph as it goes up, the mountain is right at around 2,000, because that's like the sweet spot for an adult male, right? Of course, if you're in different stages of life, maybe different. If you're an athlete, you're going to need more. And, you know, if you're older and don't do as much exercise or activity, you're going to need a little bit less. But once again, it's unique for each of you guys. So based on my needs, 2,000 calories is a sweet spot. And yeah, I could go 10% under 1,800, and actually that could potentially be a good thing, provided I'm getting all my nutrient needs met, going a little bit under, so that I don't build up that extra weight, right? Hey, some days I'm out somewhere and I'm eating so good food, and maybe I'll eat a little bit more, too much, right? 2,100, 2,200, you know, a couple days, right? You can't always hit the same exact spot every single time. Like when you're up at bat, you're not always going to hit at the same spot at the bat, right? So that's all right, right? So we want to be in this ideal range with maybe a target, and then sometimes you're going to come out too low, sometimes a little bit too high, and that is all right, right? That's okay. You know, that's my goal, is to teach you guys that there's always this range, that as long as you're generally within the range, you're going to be doing great, because you're going to be doing a lot better than the average person. So you guys could clearly see in the calories, and most of you guys would probably agree with me on the calorie intake, we need to get a certain amount of calories a day. You don't want too much, you don't want too few, you want to hit it right in the sweet spot. All right, next slide. All right, so what is the sweet spot for carbohydrates? There are macronutrients, and macronutrients are normally thought of as carbohydrates, protein, and fat. There are ratios out there, especially in the raw foods movement, of 80-10-10, for example. I personally do not agree with these macronutrient ratios myself. If you guys are living on those macronutrient ratios, great for you, and it is working. That being said, in this episode, I'm sharing my personal views on this topic. So as you can see, my sweet spot for carbohydrates, I try to target around 60% of my calories come from carbohydrates, right? That being said, I'm not always perfect and I don't always hit 60, and I don't need to hit 60. As long as I'm within the range, guys, between 50 to 70, right? That means if I'm as low as 50, some of my calories are coming from other foods such as proteins or fats or even a little bit of fiber. And if I'm up at 70 some days, that's great, right? I personally don't want to be above 70, in my opinion, because if you eat too many carbohydrates, you crowd out other very important foods, such as fats and proteins. So, of course, we're talking about total carbohydrates. When I talk about carbohydrates, I talk about whole food sources of healthy, minimally processed carbohydrates. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. I'm not talking about eating, white sugar to get 60% of your calories from carbohydrates. I'm talking about whole food plants, foods that you can look at and you can see that is an oat groat, or that is a piece of oatmeal, that's a fruit, that's a vegetable, right? These are whole food plant sources, not processed. No breads, no cakes, none of these things no soda, no soft drinks, right? Nothing with like added sugar, right? We want whole food sources, all right? So yes, I'm at 60% sweet spot for carbohydrates, but once again, range 50 to 70, you're gonna be pretty good. All right, next up, protein. Where am I on protein? So my opinion on protein has changed over the many years, and the sweet spot for protein, my opinion, this also can change depending on your age and your physical activity level. But basically, the studies are clear, right? Too much protein can cause major issues, including disease and premature aging, right? So you don't want to get too much protein. That way, in addition, you don't want too little protein. Too little protein may cause muscle wasting and other problems, because we need protein to survive. So my ideal range is about 15% of protein where I'm at now in life. And once again, there's a range. I don't need to be specific. I don't need to hit 15% each and every day, because my sweet spot is between 12 to 18%. I don't like to go above 18%, and I'm good at 12%, So some days I eat a little bit more beans, some days I have more greens, some days I, get a little bit less. And that's all right, right? It's all going to balance out. And aside from the calories percent from protein, where you get your protein matters. In my opinion, plant foods are the best sources of proteins, provided you're eating a wide variety of plant foods and not just picking out on only fruit, right? You are likely to get all your amino acids, which are the proteins. In plant-based diets, certain amino acids may be lower in certain plants than others, and that's why I recommend eating a diverse diet, including a diet rich of different beans and legumes, nuts and seeds and grains, and especially the vegetables and other green foods, such as even algae, that can be actually really rich in protein. But yeah, 15% is my ideal target, but the sweet spot is between 12 to 18%. Next up, what is my opinion on fat intake? I know a lot of people on the raw vegan diet try to do like a very low fat diet, 10%, and I'm personally not in agreement with very low raw food diets, like under 10%. Like that to me is just not healthy. Fat is a very important nutrient for us. There are plenty of studies that show when you eat fat with your especially greens or vegetables or even fruits, right, you get increased absorption of the fat soluble nutrients. This is very critical. In addition, there are plenty of studies that show eating an ounce or two of nuts a day increase your longevity and decrease your mortality. And the fibers are quite healthy, right? You don't want to pig out on nuts either, right? And of course, we talk about fats, and there's many different kinds of fats you could get. We'll talk about later, more specifics. But generally, I recommend only whole food sources of fats, such as nuts and seeds, fatty fruits, for example. And some fatty fruits could be like olives, or coconuts, which are an honorary fruit. Once again, my range for fats are between 15 to 25. On this one, I always get around 20. I don't like to go above 25 because once you get up to above 30, standard American diet maybe is around 30% fat, and I think too much fat is not good. Yeah, this is going to cause problems in the long run. And of course, the source of the fat's very important. I'm only for plant-based fats, generally, usually in their whole food form package. All right, so now I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, John, we went over carbs, fat, and protein, but if we add up your sweet spots, it doesn't add up to 100, adds up to 95. Yes, you are correct. So let's find out why. So here's the thing, guys. A lot of you guys think of macronutrients as carbohydrates, fat, and protein, and those are the only macronutrients. Well, here I'm at the USDA, if you trust the government, website for macronutrients, and let's see what they say about macronutrients. It says macronutrients are types of foods that are needed in large quantities in the diet. These includes carbohydrates, protein, fats, fiber, and water, right? How many people that you learn about the macronutrients will ever tell you guys that fiber and even water are macronutrients? Now, there's plenty of micronutrients that I'm not discussing in today's episode because that's a whole nother topic, and I'm a big advocate for eating a very high and extremely high micronutrient-rich diet, especially things like plant polyphenols and other plant phytonutrients that the plants make. That being said, most people talk about carbs, proteins, and fats, but they forget about the fiber and the water. So let's hear what I believe about fiber and water. All right, first up is the fiber. Fiber isn't just fiber. Diversity is the secret to health. So, I think the USDA would recommend maybe up to 40 grams of fiber a day for the standard male, and they say females need a little bit less. And once again, all these numbers are based around me. I'm a standard male. But this is my opinion on this topic, and my grams of fiber per day, I want to double what the USDA says, because fiber does contain small amounts of calories, because it is digested by our microbiome, and it is a calorie source, very small compared to the other two. But I'll say, the fiber source that I'm recommending will kind of add up to another, 5% of your calories from, yes, the fiber, right? I encourage you guys to not just take a psyllium husk powder and to get 80 grams. That would be terrible. You'd probably really have some bad problems. But here's the thing, to me, I don't necessarily think about oh, I gotta eat fiber today, right? Because when I eat fruits and vegetables and my lettuces and everything, including some of my juices, they have small amounts of fiber in there as well, right? I am eating my fiber. So it's not like I try to focus on fiber. I try to meet all my carbohydrate, fat, and protein through whole food sources, which, guess what, have all fiber. So if I'm eating my standard diet and how I eat, I'm gonna hit 80 grams of fiber without a problem. And usually, unless I'm going on more juice, higher juice diet that day, I'm not gonna be that low, because even juice can contain, good amounts of fiber. Anyways, my recommendation for your sweet spot for fiber is between 60 and 100 grams of fiber. You're thinking, John, I can't handle 100 grams of fiber, man. I eat fast food and I probably get 10 grams of fiber a day. And if you tried to go to 100 grams of fiber tomorrow, you're screwed. So I always recommend, if you guys are making dietary changes, don't just jump in and try to hit all these numbers that I'm recommending today. If you guys are transitioning over to eating healthfully, I recommend doing it, slowly and surely, right? Still eat junk food and slowly crowd out the junk food by adding in more fruits, vegetables, and other whole food sources of plants. But yeah, here's the thing, indigenous societies and even Paleolithic people, that they've researched in the past, some of them have eaten over 100 grams of fiber in a day, And, you know, here's the thing. They ate whatever they could find, and sometimes all the animals ran from them, and they would eat lots of plants, right? Some peoples in, you know, areas that have not been modernized in the world today still eat over 100 grams of fiber. It's not always the same. They don't always eat 100 every single day. It could be a range from like 50 to, I don't know, even 130. But, you know, I think that it's very important for us to focus on the fiber, because especially I don't think there's any other raw vegans out there that discuss how much fiber you should be eating. I mean, especially with the new microbiome research coming out. Dr. Will Bolsowitz, who wrote the book Fiber Fueled, he talks about, you know, eating up to 100 grams of fiber a day also. I believe it's very important, and that's why most of my food is basically containing fiber. I drink some juices, which we'll find out in a minute. But yeah, fiber is so essential and should not be neglected. And the other thing, once again, the main keyword on this whole slide is diversity. Don't just eat one kind of fiber. I even take fiber supplements, you know, to get fibers in me that I wouldn't normally eat otherwise. That's how important I believe it is, all right? So next up, last macronutrient, which most people don't ever talk about, is, of course, water. So water is critical for health. There have been several raw vegans that have lost their life due to dry fasting, because when your body's dehydrated, things don't work properly and big problems can arise. Well, there are some raw vegans out there still who say we could get all the water and hydration we need from our food, which I agree. All our food pretty much should have high water percentage content, and we should not be literally eating dehydrated food, because that's going to dehydrate you. That being said, I am under the belief that while most of my hydration can come from food, I also believe that we should also get some hydration from our beverages. Water in the forms of a liquid that we could actually drink, you know, or like a juice or something like that, or even just water, in my opinion, is utilized a little bit differently because it's kind of flooded in a little bit different quickly, whereas, you know, water from our food, unless it's maybe watermelon, you know, maybe is used a little bit differently. So that being said, while I get most of my hydration from my food, and pretty much everything I eat is water rich aside from a few kale chips or crackers or something, you know, even when I heat processed food, it's steamed, and that is full of water. Nonetheless, that being said, I even believe that we should even drink some water. So every day I drink between half a liter or 1 liter of fractionally distilled water in a day. But then if you could see on my chart here, my ideal amount to drink in a day of liters of water from beverages, right, is about 2.5 liters. So I have like maybe like 1.5 liters short. If I drink 1 liter of water, and if I drink half a liter of water, then I'm like 2 liters short. So where do I get the other 2 liters from? Well, that's why I drink juice. I just drank literally about a liter of green juice this morning, and I like to drink juices for my additional hydration. Hydration is very important, guys. I don't want you guys to become dehydrated, and, you know, while some raw vegans would say you could get all your hydrations from fruits, you know, I think that is very important to also take in some hydration as well, you know, from beverages. Whether that means you want to make a smoothie, you know, I would probably agree more with a tea than coffee or something like that. But we need to get some beverages in every day, and of course, drinking some pure water every day, I also believe, is quite important, especially in the mornings and in the evenings. But if it's going to wake you up in the middle of the night by drinking water before you go to bed, don't do it, because it's more important to get your sleep. All right, so yeah, those are the main macronutrients. Now kind of let's dive in deeper. Let's learn my opinions on how much raw versus heat processed foods a person should eat. All right, so what is the sweet spot for raw food intake? So, you know, for the longest, large part of my life, I was like literally I thought this was supposed to be 100%. I believed, my opinion now is falsely, that 100% raw vegan diet was optimal for everybody. And that, you know, nowadays I've seen the error in my ways, and I see that the problems of eating an all raw diet. When you eat an all raw diet, the issue is you are now restricting and you're limiting what you can eat. So now you can't eat as great of a diversity of foods. You're limiting yourself mostly to vegetables and fruits. While some raw vegans do sprout legumes and some grains, most raw vegans unfortunately don't do that. Maybe if you did do that, you could maybe be closer to 100. That being said, once again, I'm more conservative these days in what I will recommend to others. I think the more closer you get to 100% on a raw vegan diet, I think it makes it more especially difficult to, stay healthy and keep your microbiome healthy. Not to say that it's impossible, because I have friends that do it, but it makes it more challenging. And unless you want to really, be creative and keep up with your blood tests and be checking your markers and all this stuff, I think, it's much more wise to not be as rigid to the 100% raw rule. That being said, I do believe that most heat processed foods are terrible. That's beyond the scope of this episode. I'll put links down below on the best ways to heat process your food if you're interested. The only way I heat process food is in an instant pot, where I'm basically steaming the food for the most part under pressure, and in some case pressure boiling, such as in the case of when I cook my beans or rice. All right, so my ideal sweet spot for raw foods is 80%. We want to eat at least 80%. I think most people don't eat enough raw foods, unfortunately, especially vegans that are eating processed junk foods. And when you eat raw foods, that means you're going to eat more fruits and vegetables, minimally processed or non-heated nuts and seeds, and other foods, sprouted grains and sprouted beans that can be eaten raw. And these are very critical and important foods for our health. That being said, while my sweet spot and ideal is 80, could be as low as 70, but could be as high as 90. Some days I'll hang out at raw food festivals and I'll eat 100% raw. Hey, I'm good for a day or two, but generally I like to keep it around 80 to 90%. But, hey, some days might be the middle of the winter and I don't have as many fruits and might hit 70. So, once again, guys, I'm more about flexibility than these rigid diet rules. Rigid diet rules make things more difficult to hit your nutrient needs, makes it more difficult for you to stick to, so you're more likely to fail. Whereas, if you guys have more of a sweet spot, you have a space for being flexible and a space for succeeding, much more often instead of failing much more often. All right. So that's my raw food intake. Next up, let's find out how much fruits I believe is optimally healthy. All right, next up, my sweet spot for fruit intake. Now I know I'm going to get some pushback from some raw vegans that believe fruit is God and fruit is the best food on the planet and we should eat fruit, and not eat any other food, right? I definitely don't believe that's true. I also believe that fruit is an incredibly healthy food. I also have seen that most Americans, unfortunately, do not eat enough fruit as well. That being said, once again, this chart is for me at my stage, at my life, where I'm at now, based on my testing, based on what's going on with me personally, right? So I get approximately, my goal every day is to get about a third of my calories, or 35% approximately of my calories from fruits a day. That being said, I am not rigid, right? While I love my fruits, I've been having some mono meals of mangoes, because I got some good deals on mangoes lately, and eating some berries every day, right? Some days I may not have that much fruit. I may just forget. I may be eating other things, and I'll have a green juice. I don't recommend juicing fruits. I recommend juicing your vegetables and greens. But some days my fruit intake may be low, 20%. I always try to get some in unless I totally forget. But then I don't try to eat more than 50%, and I think that's even pushing it. You'll tend to find me more closer to the 20 to 40% range these days. When I was younger, of course, I had maybe more closer to 40 to 60%. But, for me right now, I'm at like 35%. I feel comfortable with, my body could handle. And once again, for each person, it's totally different. You may be able to handle more fruits than the next guy. Maybe you're more active and you need more fruits than the next guy or girl. So it really depends on you. And I think, once again, one size fits all models is what I'm against. I am for, models such as mine that gives you a range. 20 to 50% is a pretty good range, guys. And if you want to listen to some of the science, right? On the science, there's like basically a U curve with fruit. Most people don't eat enough fruit. They don't get any benefit. At a certain point, you could eat fruit, you get benefit. But then at a certain point, if you eat more fruit than that, then you're at a detriment because, you know, it's taken the place of other healthier foods that you're actually not eating, because now you're, in my opinion, overeating fruit, right? So this is very important. Of course, not all fruit is created equal. My 20% or 35% of my fruit calories will not come from straight bananas and eating, you know, 10 bananas or 5 bananas or whatever it is. You know, I'm not a big fan of bananas unless they grew off my tree in Puerto Rico or my plants. I tend to prefer nutrient-dense fruits that have a lot more phytonutrients. So I tend to prefer a lot of berries. I also tend to prefer a lot of like local picked fresh fruits that I grew myself, or I visit local farms. And I'm so glad that cherry season is pretty much about here, as are some of the stone fruits, such as the first of the year apricots that I'll probably have within about a month. All right, next up. So while fruit is an important nutrient, what do I feel is more important than fruit? Of course, I feel that leafy greens and non-starchy vegetables. I mean, I got my shirt on, growing your greens. I'm in my garden where I grow tons of greens. I believe you should eat more vegetables than fruits. I know this is not a popular thing in the raw foods movement, but if you listen to especially some longer term raw vegans, they're always going to tell you to eat your vegetables, right? Very few long-term raw vegans will tell you guys to avoid vegetables and to only eat fruits. Vegetables are very important. They have more nutrient density. They also have less caloric value than the fruits, and they are critical. And one of the biggest errors I see is that most people on a raw vegan diet tend to over-focus on the fruits and they under-eat the vegetables, which will bite them in the ass, in my opinion, in the long run. Of course, yeah, for a certain amount of time you could deal with it, and of course it also depends on your fruit quality, but vegetables to me are just so grounding and so important. So what do I believe my intake of vegetables should be? Well, the ideal, I believe, is 45% of my calories come from vegetables, right? I may hit that, may not hit that. You know, I eat lots of vegetables, guys, whether they're raw. Usually my vegetables, like 1 quart of juice or 1 liter of juice today was green juice that I drank already. That allows me to get more calories in of the greens. You can make them into blended green smoothies, blended salads, have fresh raw soups like I make, where I just chop up a bunch of vegetables and make a pepper juice with some herbs, spices, nuts, and seeds and blend it up. So it's literally like a salad, but it's swimming in pepper juice sauce. That's lower fat than a salad dressing would be because it's more diluted. Also, I steam vegetables as well, many different kinds of vegetables, okay? And I'm talking about non-starchy vegetables. This is very important, guys. I'm making a distinction here, you know, because starchy vegetables could add up quickly, and I'm definitely not a big fan, as you'll learn in a minute, of eating a starch-based diet. So yeah, 45%, I mean, the studies are clear, guys. Like, the non-starchy vegetables and leafy greens have some of the best benefits to your health based on the published studies, you know. And of course, I'm not discussing if we should eat them raw or cooked. I think most of them should be eaten raw. However, I do heat process some of mine. Once again, it is only in the Instant Pot. We shouldn't be baking, we shouldn't be frying these things. Can create carcinogens. But once again, the range is 35 to 55% of your calories should still come from non-starchy vegetables, and especially the leafy greens. This is how important this category is to me. This is probably like the base. If I had a food pyramid, which is outdated these days, or my plate to be like mostly vegetables, and I would encourage you guys also to focus on your vegetables as well. You're also going to get plenty of good fiber from your vegetables, as we talked about that earlier. All right, let's move on. There are other foods besides fruits and vegetables in the plant-based realm that you should be eating, and let's find out what they are. All right, next up are beans and legumes, right? I've had videos on beans and legumes, links down below for my video, why this raw vegan defies the raw vegan rules, and I eat beans. You know, whether you want to sprout your beans and legumes, some can be sprouted, some, if you sprout them and you eat them, they will kill you, such as kidney beans. But things like lentils, once again, adzuki, mung, chickpeas can be sprouted and eating if you want to keep your raw food label. That being said, I'd probably prefer to be more healthy than keep a raw food label. That being said, within my raw food label, you know, 75% of my or more of my calories are from raw food. I consider myself a raw vegan, although I have good friends that say, you're not raw vegan, John, because you don't need 100%. All right, you know, to each their own. Nonetheless, you know, the science and evidence is clear on beans and legumes. you know, beans promote longevity. There's no ifs, ands, buts, or about it. So am I just gonna plug my ears and not listen to that science because I'm a fruitarian and I wanna be raw vegan? No, I have to open up my eyes. In addition, the beans have different kinds of prebiotic fibers that are not contained within fruits and vegetables. They're very important for our microbiome. And of course, my microbiome, to share with you guys, you know, was imbalanced because I believe I had more bacteria that was aptly designed to chow down on fruits and not some of these more complex carbohydrates or resistant starches, you know, or prebiotic fibers that are in the beans. So nonetheless, these days, instead of eating more fruit, I would rather actually eat more beans and legumes. So my percentage of calories from beans and legumes, you know, is at 20% of my calories in a day. Sometimes it's a bit lower because I'll add like a Tetra Pak box of beans to my raw salad, and then at night I'll just like eat that, and in the salad that I batch prepare, I'll get, you know, a bunch of beans, so then it might be as low as 10% of my calories. It's a rare day that I eat up to 30% of my calories from beans, but maybe I'm traveling and I have like my boxes of beans that I get actually at Whole Foods organic. Once again, link down below to that video. And I don't have any fruit for whatever reason because it's out of season or I'm traveling somewhere else, but I do have beans, and I'll just open another box of beans and eat the whole box of beans, which could be like, I don't know, 350 calories or something, because it's like 3 servings of 110 to 130 calories, you know, per little box, and I'll just polish off the whole box and I'm happy. And actually, the cool thing when I eat the beans that are pre-cooked, right, no salt added, very important, is that I feel full for a long period of time. Not like if I eat fruit, like, oh, a couple hours later I need to eat and I'm hungry again. Beans really satiate me, guys, for a lot longer. I believe they're quite healthy. And once again, you guys don't need to eat heat processed beans if you guys don't want to, but I do encourage you guys to sprout your beans that can be sprouted, which I did mention previously. So next up, we have the sweet spot for whole grains and starchy vegetables. And once again, because I lowered my percentage of fruit, I need to increase other types of foods, and I believe this is beneficial because now I'm eating a greater diversity than just focusing on a lot of fruits and some vegetables. Now I get to eat other fun foods, and even if you want to retain your raw label, you can still increase your calories from whole grains and starchy vegetables. I buy an organic glyphosate-free sprouted oats. Actually, they have them available at Costco, I just saw. Again, they brought them back, and yeah, I get the sprouted oats that are rolled into rolled oats, and those can be considered raw, just like raw cashews would be considered raw. You could also buy plenty of grains. I buy organic einkorn grain that you can soak and sprout and get a little tail and then eat. You know, I also sprout other grains or pseudo grains such as quinoa, millet, amaranth, even teff, right? I get all different kinds of different grains, and more importantly, pseudo grains, including millet. And then of course there's starchy vegetables, and a lot of those grains that I just mentioned, guys, you could soak and sprout them and eat them. There's no need to cook them. And then on the starchy vegetables, you think, oh, you can't eat starchy vegetables raw, John. Well, right, potatoes, I don't recommend eating them raw, they're toxic. But you could eat some sweet potatoes that are starchy and you eat them raw. I would basically, they don't really have any toxins in there, but they're really gonna taste starchy to you. So I would like spiralize them or do kind of like thin slices of them. I wouldn't do them thick. You could also juice them if you really wanted to get them in you. That being said, these days I just will heat process in the Instant Pot my oatmeal and starchy vegetables. And once again, guys, when I eat these starchy vegetables, I'm not just getting russet potatoes. It's actually, I don't buy russet potatoes, guys. I'll buy like purple sweet potatoes, purple potatoes actually, which right now in the springtime is really hard to find because they were harvested last year and I think they've run out of them. So I'm kind of waiting for them to come back into play. So I'm kind of eating more of the rice. I eat purple rice, red rice, just got some green rice the other day, which is kind of fun. And of course my beans. So, you know, I want to not restrict different food categories just because I'm raw vegan, right? I want to set up my life so that I'm more inclusive instead of exclusive. And once again, my calories from whole grains and starchy vegetables, say I eat a little bit of oatmeal in the morning, which keeps me fuller for longer than, say, eating a fruit meal. And then maybe I have a small purple sweet potato at night. You know, I could be right around 20% of my calories from the whole grains and starchy vegetables. Also, of course, things like buckwheat. You could sprout buckwheat if you want to keep your raw label. Actually, I eat a sprouted buckwheat granola, which is one of the ways I get my grains. But yeah, 20% is my target, and of course, we have between 10 to 30%, as the sweet spot. And once again, guys, my whole concept is for you guys to be flexible. If you're raw vegan, only eat fruits and vegetables, hey, sprout some buckwheat. In some camps, they say buckwheat is even a fruit, and you could sprout it and eat it. It's very easy to digest, and even if you get 10% of your calories coming from buckwheat, in my opinion, you're doing yourself a favor, because once again, you are diversifying your dietary intake to get a whole different spread of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, and especially more different kinds of unique fibers. All right, next up, let's talk about the sweet spot for whole food fats, including nuts, seeds, and fatty fruits. So, I know some people out there want to do an ultra low fat diet, 80-10-10 with no overt fats. I personally don't believe that is healthy myself. I've looked at the science, I've looked at the research, and once again, the fats you eat are not the fats you wear. The fats you eat, especially when you eat a salad, for example, will help improve the absorption of fat-soluble nutrients astronomically. If you don't believe me, links down below to my video by just adding like a half an avocado or some avocado to your salad or even salsa. You can get significantly greater uptakes of things like lycopene and other fat-soluble nutrients, according to published studies. So I'm right around at 20%, right? This is very important, guys. You don't want to get too high on fats. I mean, the standard American diet is maybe around 30% plus fat, calories from fat. And once again, these are whole food sources of fat. I believe in eating like about an ounce or two of nuts and seeds, avocado. These days, I also do some high quality olive oil. I'm not a fan of just buying cheap olive oil. The olive oil I buy is like $90 a bottle, which is high polyphenol. I may have another video about that, but generally I'm only a fan of whole food sources of fats, not extracted oils. I guess the exceptions are high quality olive oil, flax oil I made at home for the omega-3s, and also I take an algae oil for the DHA, which I figure is very important. Nonetheless, 20% is the target, and some days I'll get a bit lower. Some days I forget to eat nuts and seeds, and that's fine. 15, but as high as 25 on some rare days. So yeah, I know this is a lot different, guys, than a lot of raw food models, but once again, I'm looking at the science, and your calories do need to come from somewhere, and I believe that whole food source of fats can be healthy if eaten in not too high of amounts. All right, so that's my whole presentation, talking about the main sources of different plant foods and how much you should be eating. But now I want to go ahead and give a summary. So the final summary is your optimal daily intake blueprint. To thrive, not just survive, your diet should hit key sweet spots across all categories. Here's a science-informed blueprint. Macronutrients, carbohydrates from 50 to 70%, protein 12 to 18%, fats 15 to 25% from whole food sources. Whole food intake goals. Raw food should be 70 to 90% of your diet. Fruit should make up 20 to 50% of your diet. Leafy greens and non-starchy vegetables should be the whopping 35 to 55% of your diet. Beans and legumes should make up 10 to 30%. Whole grains and starchy vegetables should be 10 to 30%. Whole food source of fat, nuts, seeds, fatty fruits, 15 to 25%, right? In addition, lifestyle and gut health anchors, very important. Once again, most people do not consider fiber. Fiber is very important, and when I'm eating all the whole food sources above, I'm getting plenty of fiber, so I don't need to track my fiber. I just need to eat enough of my fruits and vegetables, beans and legumes, whole grains and starchy vegetables, and nuts and whatnot, and I will easily achieve, my usually 80 grams from when I've tracked it, of fiber a day, which is easily within my realm. Of course, if you're eating processed foods and fast foods and junk foods and breads and cookies and soda and all these things, meat doesn't have any fiber, you're gonna hit your fiber target. And water, which I recommend from beverages, should be between 2 to 3 liters a day. Actually, I'm feeling thirsty right now. I'm gonna go ahead and drink another liter of juice right after this video. So the final takeaway is nutrition isn't about perfection. This is very important, guys. I mean, I know a lot of raw vegans out there will say, you gotta be perfect and stuff. And no, it's about consistently hitting your personal sweet spots. And once again, I share with you guys my personal sweet spots in here. You may want to come up with your own because you think, oh, I should eat a little bit more fruit, but I want to eat a little bit less beans or maybe no beans. I mean, I would encourage you guys not to completely eliminate any food categories that I've talked about, but at least try to get one food that you would feel all right with in your diet, right? Anyways, I want you guys to consistently hit your personal sweet spots, focus on nutrient density, plant diversity, and staying within these flexible zones to support a long, energetic, and disease-resistant life. That's what I want to share with you guys today. You know, I want to go a lot deeper than other people have on these topics, and I mean, each one of these topics I could go a lot deeper in, but I want to just give you guys a general overview because I've had many people on my show in the past who I interview that I may not necessarily agree eye to eye on. And of course, these are my personal opinions and I'm sharing with you guys if you guys value what I think and value also the research I do. These were not very easy numbers to come up with. I mean, the main way I came up with this is I did kind of a chronometer to see where I usually hit, and then I kind of made the range around it. Because every day I eat, it's not like I'm looking at a chronometer and putting in everything, but I know the pattern on which I eat, and then I'm always falling within the ranges. And of course, some ranges are a little bit tighter than others, such as the protein range. You don't want to eat too much protein, can cause issues, but you don't want to eat too little protein, right? Not too much, not too little, just enough. And I mean, these are all the macronutrients and whole food intake goals. I didn't even cover micronutrients, which is a whole nother video that would probably be twice as long as this one. In any case, I really hope you guys enjoyed this format, this episode where I showed you guys my personal nutrition beliefs. And if you guys did, hey, please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Also be sure to share this with other people in the raw vegan space, which is the space that I directly, talk to, so that they can improve their health and their diet as well. Also, of course, share this with vegans that are not eating enough raw foods and eating too many processed foods, because I really believe eating a whole food, plant-based diet is the way to go. Also, be sure to click that subscribe button right down below so you don't miss my new and upcoming episodes that are coming in 5 to 7 days. You never know where I'll show up, what you'll be learning on my YouTube channel. Make sure you click the little bell so you get notified as many videos spent. And finally, be sure to check my past episodes. Past episodes are a wealth of knowledge. Over 800 episodes at this time on this channel dedicated to teach you guys all about how to eat and dial in your healthy, raw, fruit and vegetable based diet. Also, be sure to check my past episodes. Over 800 episodes I have on this channel. I'll link down below some of my popular videos I've made in the past where I go into dispelling some of the cooked food myths and how to properly heat processed food, as well as the importance of resistant starch and other videos I believe that you should be watching if you are interested in improving your health, because I kind of go where no other raw vegans go in this space, because I literally like to think I push the boundaries. All right, so with that, my name is John Kohler with OKRaw.com. We'll see you next time, and until then, remember, keep eating your fresh fruits and vegetables. They're always the best.